Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I am joined once again by Konstantinos from Para
There you
Bellum, and we're going to be taking another look at a spotlight in the world of EA. This time round, we're taking a look at sky farms for the Wadroon.
Yes.
And it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it shows us more of the Wadroon society and how they've developed since being freed from their creators, and sort of it adds in that Mesoamerican idea of the sort of the terraced farms. So it gives us a bit more of the world that they're inhabiting, but it also sets up some interesting possibilities for the future of the world as well.
Yep.
So,
No, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, how long have these sky farms been developed? Because it does say that Ukanfazane was sort of responsible for it, but we haven't really touched on what she's done so much in regards to the expansiveness of the civilization since the sort of the early foundings around the oases.
Well, this is a very recent development, which of course kind of begs the question, why wasn't it done before if it was possible? I think this, exactly the question you asked, underlines kind of an edge that exists around the Ukunfazane, that she's obviously trying to care for her people and protect her people, but she's not always the most forthcoming or most benevolent of creatures.
Okay.
We have noticed this in the beginning of the story of the Wadroon, when after she returned from her self-discovery voyage and found the tribe, well, her people split up in tribes, warring each other like crazy and killing each other for food. We saw that her method of bringing them together was not exactly peaceful. To be fair, she had to face a very young and very violent civilization that was literally bred for war. So she needed to rein this in. And in order to do that from a position of authority, you needed to show that you can do it better than everyone else. So while understandable, it still remains kind of sketchy the way she did this. And now we see a cunning that reflects an idea that she doesn't possibly trust her own people to a certain degree. Like, she had to trick her own consort at the time, Nagral, which is a storyline that we've explored through the Living World, to make him think that it's his idea, that he gathers all the roaming tribes, or those of the roaming tribes rather, that would follow him and cross the clustering gates. And only after he did so did she start the project of the Sky Farms. Of course, there are actual reasons for this. She could not really change the entirety of the mountain. She knew that this would kind of warrant a response from the orders, very possibly, like immediately. And the more people she had to sustain from those farms, the worse the situation would be. It is also, I think we can guess, if you want, her intentions, that the previous system, for all its flaws, was working. Sure, the tribes in the oasis were more well taken care of, but the roaming tribes did survive. They were doing okay. They did have for some time the lost lands far to the east that were then lost when the Old Dominion started expanding its influence. So the system kind of worked, and perhaps one can speculate that she don't want to upset that balance for some time because it was working. And with the Old Dominion now becoming an actual tangible threat that she cannot really quantify because she has no eyes in the Old Dominion, she doesn't know how many people they can field, let's put it this way, or what their true capabilities when they act as an army are. She has faced them as individual kind of, let's say, patrols, or even lost undead that kind of roam around aimlessly, but she has never truly faced an intelligent army that comes for conquest. So in order to prepare for that, she thought that, okay, if I lose even one oasis for a small period of time, that could be detrimental to my people.
Yeah.
That would cripple my war effort. So she began that project after ensuring, first of all, that a portion of her people would survive no matter what, and also that a limited amount of sky farms, because she could not dedicate a lot knowing that war is coming, would be able to sustain in case we lost some of the other food sources they have. So it does, through this spotlight, we see more, I think, about the Ukunfazane than the actual spotlight, which is interesting in its own merit. Like the idea that, yes, these people have a very high demand of food. So how do they manage, considering that, for instance, that cannibalism is a huge taboo for the Wadroon? It's not an option. We can eat our own dead when they die, because that would open a can of worms. So it was made a very, very strong taboo very early on, with a possible exception that can be contrived as, you give it back to the tribe if someone is a same hands, as I call it, like takes their own life, then they can feed him possibly to the dinosaurs, which is also otherwise, because they too are very resource demanding, as you can imagine.
It's interesting as well, because it shows then that you have, I suppose it's redundancies to ensure the survival of the race, that she's been working on, obviously sending McGrail and the sort of the exiles across the mountains, and then having the sky farms produce enough for the remaining, and not just enough. It's not just subsistence living. There's enough being grown that they can ensure that there are stockpiles as well, which again helps if there are lost oasis if war comes, or if indeed she decides that they need to move en masse, that they can build up these stockpiles in advance as well.
That is, I think, the fear of the orders as well, who are safeguarding, because there is an agreement that we don't know exactly its terms between the orders and the Wadroon. We know this since the appearance of the Wadroon, that there was an agreement, which is why the orders simply opened the doors for the roaming tribes, Nagral and the roaming tribes, to cross, and even assisted with communication at first with local nobility. So it might be that she was allowed to do some things on the Closer Mountains. It might be that she wasn't, and she knows she's stretching the lines of the agreed upon terms. So these things, well, we don't reveal for reasons, but it also shows that the situation is dynamic between the two. Yes, they had an agreement, doesn't mean they're friends and la-di-da, from now on we're going to fight together for the greater good. Those things really don't exist in our world, because the threats are too many for people to be nice about it.
I was going to say, you're not going to see Wadroon from the sort of the exiles forming ranks alongside the 100 Kingdoms to stop the Wadroon under Ukanfazane.
Well, they wouldn't. I don't think they would raise arms against the Ukunfazane, but the other, especially in a lore capacity, I don't think it's impossible. Maybe it's a little early yet, but I don't think it's impossible, and it's certainly been made a possibility through one of our faction candidates for the Project 8, which was exactly a mercenary army that gathered from everywhere, even from the Spires. It will be interesting, and we will explore it in the future. Like, we've actually been throwing ideas around about exactly how those Wadroon change from what the other Wadroon are, now that they're in contact with and they kind of have to live with 100 Kingdoms civilization around them. I think that will make a very interesting narrative on its own. So we will explore it when the time comes. But for now, it does show that the world that the Wadroon and the Ukunfazane live, and the world that pretty much every single one of the other factions lives, are very different things. They are very different places. They have very different rules, very different limitations, and very different ideas about how to deal with them. and they are the first line of defense against the Old Dominion, which is in a way kind of a universal threat. I don't imagine they are ready to, make friends with any of the living creatures anytime soon. So
yeah. It's how they view, how the Old Dominion views Woodrune when they do finally make contact. Will be interesting as to whether or not they bring them the gift of immortality in line, or just leave them to rot on the ground after them.
It will be also an interesting question to answer. Can they give them the gift of immortality, or just offer them the release of peace eternal? This is something that we have not seen and we cannot wait to see. There is actually an event running now on the Living World.
The Awakening.
Yes. Which doesn't exactly touch that. It's more of an internal affairs thing with the Old Dominion, but it will affect the whole world. Because it will shape one of the factions and one of the most threatening factions.
Yeah.
So no matter what form the Old Dominion takes once they come out the other end of this event, it will shape things up.
Yeah.
Without, of course, kind of changing the nature of anything really so early. It will a little. It will. From a certain point of view, it will. But it won't change what the Old Dominion are in any way.
It will be fascinating to see how these things pan out in the future. If people have any questions, please drop them below. If you're not already part of the Living World, you should go across to the Para Bellum website, sign up, and you can actually help influence the future of the Awakening at the moment, and storylines and events that happen down the line as well, so you can have a real impact there. Konstantinos, it's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you for having me.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.